Hey, what's up? Again, I'm sorry if the audio's bad. I'm doing my best. I'm having some issues, but I actually, this time around, actually have some food, and I actually have a nice bottle of whiskey. So, that's pretty good for me. Uh, anyway, uh, guess what I'm gonna talk about? I'm gonna talk about Star Trek. And it's actually a good one, but to do it, I'm gonna have to spoil an episode, and then I'm gonna talk about something else. So, one second while I pour this. And also, I don't condone underage drinking, just to put it out there. Yay, yay, yay. Okay, what was I saying? Yes. So, I want to talk about an episode of Star Trek that I think is a real one of the first defining moments of a character, and it's something that another uh, show does not have, that may or may not be part of the newer Star Treks. In this episode, it's actually towards the end of season one, and the episode is titled "Duet." It's one of my favorites, and it's a it's heavily centered around Major Kira. Major Kira was actually one of my favorite characters on the show. I remember talking to somebody about what characters they liked, and I said Kira and Benjamin. He said, "Oh, I don't like Kira." I'm like, "Why?" "Yeah, because she's kind of a bitch." And I'm like, "No, no." And trust me, this guy likes Star Trek, but I'm like, "No, you're just misunderstanding her." I mean, yeah, if you don't like her, that's fine, but Kira's character has always been somebody that has always been, she always had to walk an edge or walk across an edge or whatever. She was basically raised during the occupation of Bajor. From a young age, 12 years old, she joined the resistance, and she was actually part of the Shakar, or resistance cell, fighting against our Cardassians. And she's this character who is tough, resourceful, ready to fight, but she also has this sweetness to her and this tenderness to her after after Benjamin comes into the picture and the Cardassians are gone, and she still has those characteristics and those qualities, but she's able to grow more as a person, and that's something she always has to struggle with, something she always has to fight against, where even the Kai, which is basically the Bajoran Pope, uh, yeah, that's basically their Bajoran version of the Pope. That's like their spiritual leader. Even she is a person who's heavily influenced by their religion and their faith, and she is a true believer. And she has moments with the Kai in a certain episode, and it does show that she's conflicted when it comes to certain things and certain things that she's done, certain things she's had to do, and she greatly values the Kai's opinion of her. And it shows in that episode. But the episode that I want to talk about is Duet. In Duet, a transport ship arrives and drops off a person suffering from Kalanora syndrome. Kalanora syndrome is basically an illness. Yeah, there you go. I solved it. And they go for a checkup, and Kira informs Benjamin that she wants to go down and see them. And he's like, why? And she explains, well, the only way to contract Kalanora syndrome was to, be at Galatep, which was a Bajoran labor camp. And there was a collapse in one of the caves, the mines, and it actually caused that syndrome. So she goes there. She wants to meet a survivor, and she tells Benjamin that they're seen as a symbol of hope and endurance for their people and stuff, and he agrees. She goes there, and instead of finding a Bajoran, she finds a Cardassian, which immediately she signals for security and calls Odo. And then, ooh, sorry, I just took a sip. And then Kira wants him thrown into security, Bashir doesn't know what's going on, and neither does Benjamin. So they have him in a holding cell. The next scene, Kira explains to Benjamin that the only way he could have gotten that disease or that illness is if he was at the camp. And he's like, well, why does that matter? And she explains to Benjamin that if he was there, then that makes him a war criminal. And Benjamin doesn't completely agree. And she explains to him that you weren't there because her resistance cell actually helped liberate that camp. And she tells Benjamin, like you don't know, like you didn't see the piles of bodies, or the men that were beaten to where their family couldn't recognize them anymore, the women that were raped, the old people that were just buried alive because they couldn't work anymore, and all these horrible atrocities. And then they go to see him. So Benjamin goes to see him, and the man says, his name is Maritza, and he actually was teaching at Cora 2. He was teaching at Cora 2, and he was actually, a filing clerk. He claims to have another illness that's similar, but it's not Kalanora. And then they start to do more digging. Dr. Bashir confirms that no, it is in fact Kalanora syndrome. And the only way he could have got it is if he was there, and there's no other illness it could be, otherwise, the test would have confirmed it. So, I'm sorry. So now they caught him in a lie. And then after a few more scenes, Kira is talking to Cisco about how she wants to do the investigation, and Cisco doesn't want her to. She's too close to it. She won't be objective. It's personal. And Kira says it's damn personal. You're right. I helped liberate that camp, and this and that. And she says that she basically begs him that she needs to do it for them. And Cisco says, for who? And she says, for the people of the camp, for the Bajorans that aren't here anymore, and the Bajorans that can't speak for themselves anymore. She says, begs him that please let a Bajoran handle this. I swear I will, do my job. And he tells Odo that Kira is in charge of the investigation. And that shows a growth to their relationship, to where he's trusting her with this. And their relationship is still rocky, but there is a growing friendship there and a growing respect and whatnot. She starts questioning him, and he says, that he was, Kira calls out his lie, and it's true, he was at Gelatep. And he then admits it when he's caught in his lie. And Kira says, what's your name, Maritza, Amen Maritza, what did you do? And he says that she'll be disappointed, she doesn't want to know. She says, try me, and he says, I was a filing clerk. And she's like, what? Yes, I was a filing clerk, and in 14 cycles or 14 years of service, I never once lost or misplaced a file, and Galdau Heel, which was the guy in charge, said that his filing system was so perfect and amazing and wonderful. And then afterwards, he taught at the academy at Cora 2. And she says, what did you teach? I never heard of a filing clerk teaching there. And he actually says, well, believe it or not, it was actually filing. And he says, well, there you go. My crimes are laid bare. I'm guilty as charged. You may execute me. Later on, a few more scenes happen, and Kira discovers that the man in the cell isn't Maritza, but is actually Gul Darheel himself, which is very shocking. So they question him more, and and then he admits it. And now he's acting all cocky and arrogant and stuff. And Kira starts, questioning him. Oh, did you kill the real Maritza? You're gonna pay for this and that. And then he starts shouting crazy stuff like, yeah, why not? I was the best at what I did. Like I would, my every word was law. My camp was efficient and wonderful, and every time I ordered my men to kill Bajorans, they would come back. They would come back bloodied, but they would feel clean because they did it in service to me and Cardassia and blah blah blah. She says you're insane, and then she leaves basically after this huge shouting match. And and then Galdar Heel, before she leaves, tells her what? Uh, Go ahead, execute me, torture me. Don't you see it won't matter? Because you can't undo my great accomplishments. The dead will still be dead. And then she walks away. She's talking to Odo. And as they're talking, she lets slip that he actually knew that she was in the resistance cell because he had mentioned it before in one of their conversations. And he's like, "Oh, that's weird. How would he know?" Because he was in charge of a labor camp. He wasn't part of the enforcement, whatever. How would he know? And they start digging and digging and digging, and then Kira begins to question him again, and they go back and forth. And before that, though, towards the end of the episode, and this is what I'm trying to rush towards, not to do it a disservice, but to really get to the heart of this episode. It's Benjamin Sisko, Odo, Dr. Bashir, and Major Kira. They are in his office, and it's revealed that uh, Goldal Heel died 3 years ago. This was information that Odo got from Gold Dukat, and that at the same time, while the explosion and collapse happened, he was on Cardassia receiving a medal for service. A silver service medallion, if I remember correctly. So he couldn't have contracted Kalanora, and if he's been dead for 3 years, well, how could this man be Goldal Hero? And then it's revealed that in his last 2 weeks at the academy, he actually resigned and he got all of his affairs in order, and he also provided handsomely for his housekeeper. And Commander Kira, she doesn't buy it. She's like, look, this may raise some interesting questions, but it doesn't change the fact that this is Goldal Heel. It's just a trick. It's all fake. And then Dr. Bashir comes in and tells him that, well, he was also receiving medical treatment for his Kalanora, but then he also was receiving medicine of what they call it, thermoplastisine. I remember. Thermoplastisine, yes. And it's used as a thermal regenerative. What the hell does that mean? That means that he had his face altered to look like Goldal Heel. He had cosmetic surgery. And then Commander Kira goes to see him again. And when she's there, she enters the scene and it's quiet. She just walks in, asks, how are you doing? Do you need to see Dr. Bashir? And of course, he's, going on and on, taunting her and stuff. And then what happens, sorry, and then what happens is that he actually, he keeps going, and she, she says, anyway, she asks him, "How did you get Kellanora again?" And he confirms, "Yeah, I was there, this and that." And she says, "Well, that's not true because you were on Cardassia receiving your service medallion." Then he says, "That's not true. The reports are wrong, this and that." And she says, "Why were you taking a dermal regenerative?" Then he denies. And then then she asks, "Why you pretending to be Goldar heel?" And then he just explodes in this big maniacal tirade about how everything he did was for the greater glory of Cardassia, and while their pathetic file clerks were packing away their files, he ordered his men to begin slaughtering the laborers and stuff. And she says, "Well, if that's how you felt about your filing clerks, why did you take Maritz's name?" And he's going on and on. And when he's done, she looks at him and says, "You're Eamon Maritza, aren't you?" And he basically says, what does he say? "Oh, you mistake me for Maritza, that nothing. I am the Butcher of Galatep, this and that." And then he says, and then Kira says, "The Butcher of Galatep died 3 years ago. You're Eamon Maritza's filing clerk." And I remember this scene because he says, "No, I'm alive, and it's Maritza who's dead. Maritza, who is good for nothing but crying under his but hiding under his bunk and crying like a woman, who would every night cover his ears because he couldn't bear to hear the screaming and begging for mercy of the Bajorans." And then he starts breaking down. He starts crying, and you can see, oh shit. And then he sits down and he tells her that, how he covered his ears every night, but he couldn't bear to hear those horrible screams. And he tells her that you have no idea what it's like to be a coward, to seeing these horrible things and do nothing. And then he says, "Maritz is dead. He deserves to be dead." And it's a very powerful scene. And it's very powerful because this whole episode is calling into question, Kira, and when she believes in her character, and when she thinks that, Maritza is in fact a filing clerk. She even tells Dax, "Oh, I wish he wasn't, because I want him to be more, so the people of Bajor can get some satisfaction." And so she actually wants him to be guilty. She even says so much. But then she decides to let him go. And Maritza tells her, "No, no, no, no. You have to go out and tell them I'm Goldar Heel." And she says, "Why? Why are you doing this?" And he says, "For Cardassia. Cardassia can only survive if it stands up and admits the truth that we're guilty, all of us, and that his death will force Cardassia to acknowledge its guilt, and we're guilty, all of us." And she decides to let him go, and she tells him that what you're asking for is murder, and enough good people have died, and I won't help be the cause of another death. And then they leave, and he's free to go. But then, as they're walking away and talking, he gets stabbed by a Bajoran and dies. And she says, "Why would you do that? He was in Goldar Heel." And he says he's a Cardassian. That's good enough. And she says, "No, it isn't. You know." And it's complete opposite of how the episode began. And I explained that whole thing in about 20 minutes, but I explained that whole thing, and I'm not doing it justice. I'm really not. It's a really good episode, and it takes place just in the space station, but it does expand a lot about Kira and what she's about, and how she's still angry and still resentful and still holding on to what happened during the conflict, because to her, I mean, it's true. Like when Benjamin, even though Starfleet and the Federation are running um, the space station, when they got there, the conflict had just ended. The space station was still in shambles. So this was very, very recent, and the occupation lasted for a little over 50 years. And throughout the series, you see Kira grow and change, and she still has those elements, that past history of violence and resentment and all this other things, but she is much more interesting than I think my buddy gave her credit for. She's not just a bitch, she's actually a very interesting, nuanced character. And why did I explain that whole thing? Well, I explained it because this whole episode, there wasn't much in the ways of excitement. The excitement was in this little mystery. It's a little mystery. And also in how this was really an episode for Major Kira to shine. Because every couple of, because the characters do get their own character focus episode where they get their chance to shine and be the main focus. And this was Kira's, her way of coming to terms with the past, or at least confronting it. And I think they handled it very well, and realizing that, as she said, that, it's, he's a Cardassian, that's good enough. And she says, no, it's not. And she has to let go of that hatred and all this other stuff, which is a kind of a running theme throughout her character, of letting go of certain things that she's holding on to, and certain griefs, and certain, just a lot of stuff. You don't see that in the new Star Trek shows. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, I dare you. I dare anybody to prove me wrong and say that they could have that there's a much more fulfilling storyline. And that's just one episode. That's not even a storyline. That's one episode. Or an overarching plot. You know what? Just send me anything. Send me an episode where you're like where you're happy at a character's triumph, or the acting is just really, really good, and you feel like, like Kira's anger towards him, and then they're going back and forth. But then in the last scene, when their last confrontation in the cell, it's calm, it's subdued. She's confused, but it's she's trying to be, compassionate, but she wants to know what's going on. And so that's way different from her previous performance, because that's how good the acting is on this show, for what it is. And again, it all took place in maybe three locations: the doctor's office, Odo security area, Cisco's office, and the holding cell. That's it. It was a very tightly focused narrative, and it does it well. I doubt anybody can show me anything in Star Trek Picard, Discovery, or anything like that that kind of has that same weight. But that's just my own opinion, of course. But I highly doubt that I can be shown something where I'm like, you know what, I was wrong. This is really good, which I don't think that's gonna happen. And I hope my audio's still good and it's not dog crap. But yeah, so that's my opinion. And I really didn't mean to talk about Star Trek again, but I was looking at things about Star Trek Picard and seeing Old Man Wharf or whatever. I saw some images and I'm like, oh, I don't want to see it. I don't care, because that's the only reason why that show exists. That show exists so fans could be like, "Oh, look, it's Picard." So what they're hoping for is they'll put it on TV or on the streaming service, and they'll say, look, see, look, it's Patrick Stewart. See, you like Patrick Stewart. Give us your money. See, look. Oh, look, there's Worf." And it's like, if this is like, I don't even know what to call it. Like they're throwing, what are they throwing at you? They're throwing dodgeballs or water balloons? What are they? They're throwing something at you. I'll think of a better analogy. Like they're throwing things at you and hoping that you'll catch it. Like, oh, look, here you go. Look, here's Picard. Oh, look, remember the Klingons? Ooh, look, here you go. And it's not really understanding. It's not understanding what makes it good or what made it special, what made it likable. And I would dare anybody to challenge me on that. And and here's but here's what's going to happen. If you're right, you're right, and I will tell you, you know what? You're right. I'm not going to pull a fast one on you. I will actually say, you know what? You are right. This is really good, and I'll admit it. But I just wanted to bring that up and why I think Kira is a really interesting character, Commander Kira. Not just because of that episode, but also I do like the episodes that she's in. It's very interesting. And to be honest, I'd rather have Kira and Dax and even Esri. I'd rather have any other character than have, well, the other captain from the other show, because they're awful. They're all awful, awful captains. You know what? I'd rather have Janeway again, or Seven and Nine, or Dax, or Esri, or the Doctor from TNG, Doctor Beverly, or I'd rather have, just any other female character. I'd rather they had their own series, to be honest. Like Dr. Beverly Crusher, Medicine Woman, and you see her, from her perspective of maybe there's a conflict in the future, and it follows her trying to heal these sick people in a war and trying to be a maybe maybe she can like lend an ear to an inexperienced captain. So let's say they made a new Star Trek show. Maybe it would work out, maybe it wouldn't. But if they want to give it a different perspective, maybe have Beverly be the main character, just as an example. And then maybe you could have her be assigned to a new ship and have her not be a mentor, but kind of be like an ear, somebody to lean on for a new captain that may be inexperienced. And she's already served with Captain Picard and many other ships. She served on the flagship, the Enterprise. So maybe she can kind of serve like a Guinan role, where if they're looking for some help or some advice, they go to her because she's an old, seasoned pro at this, and you get to see her perspective in the medical field. Now, it might be hard to kind of make a medical show about it, but it doesn't have to be a medical show. You don't have to just focus on, oh, I need cc's of anestazine. You don't need to do all that, but I'm sure you could work it out, than what they got. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got to say, because this is already almost 30 minutes. So, yeah. Watch DS9. Kira is really cool. She really is. And that's it. And also, I'm gonna eat more pizza. So yeah, man, you guys have a good one. And I'm really sorry if my audio is bad. However, I did record myself for 30 minutes, so I'm probably gonna post it, to be honest. I'm not gonna just do that whole thing over again. So have a good one. Watch DS9, Bob's Burgers, and Central Park. Peace out. Well, on the dot. Okay, bye.